All right. Brought myself up a timer because my little speaker sheet should take 20 minutes. So we'll see whether we can get through in less than. Oh, hang on. Okay, there we go. We're good. All right. So I'll try to keep myself on time. I always think a tip for people who organise conferences, rooms that are wide are a real challenge for the speaker because I feel like a clown right now. You know, I'll just be sweeping back and forth because I like making eye contact. The light in the eyes is always a challenge as well. But anyway, carry on. If I'm squinting at you, it's not because, you know, you look terrible. So this is a slide that I often use when I give this kind of presentation to budding psychologists. So I've been invited for the last few years to present to the Master of Professional Psychology, which is a new course at the ANU. And they asked me to open their course, basically, because they want their psychologists to start out with a view of what lived experience can look like. And I usually end with this one to remind people that although somebody who walks into their room for treatment might be looking for treatment, in my case for bipolar disorder and for anxiety, I am so much more than that. I am a whole person. I am all of the things that you see on this screen. So as I talk to you today, I want you to always think back to this particular representation. So anybody who's seen me speak before has probably seen my monkey, but this is now about 25 years ago. And even though I have put it in there again, and I have added Paddington Bear because this is Paddington Bear country, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because this is past me. So about 25 years ago, I was on a very different path from mental health. My path was biological anthropology. I was in primate behaviour. Some would argue I am still in primate behaviour. Different sort of primate. But this is the critically endangered yellow-tailed woolly monkey of the remote Peruvian Andean cloud forests. And I thought it was a fantastic idea for a young woman in her 20s, unfit, don't speak Spanish, let alone Quechua, to go alone to the Peruvian Andes in pursuit of this little monkey to become the next Jane Goodall. You all know who Jane Goodall? Yeah. This was my ticket to become the next Jane Goodall. And I had everybody convinced that it was a fantastic idea and that there was nothing wrong with that until I got to Peru. Then all hell broke loose. But that's about all I'm going to tell you at this stage about that story, because as I said, that's about 25 years ago. I'm going to do something today that's a little bit unusual for me, taking a bit of a risk here, but I want to talk to you about what my current lived experience is actually about, because you would have seen that I titled this A Foot in Both Worlds and about fusing lived and learned experience. And I want it to be very clear to people that even though I use the term lived experience, I don't actually see that as in the past. I don't really like the lived and living thing that's coming in because I don't think it's an unnecessary division of people. My lived experience is current and I want to tell you about it. So the other thing I'm going to do that I usually do is actually read a little bit to you, because I've been doing some creative writing. I'm not actually sure what it is yet. Might be a memoir, might be a bit boring for a memoir, you know, might just be for me. But because I've been writing it down and because I like what I've been writing down, I'm going to read it out to you so I'll inflict it on you. But why do we want to do lived experience research at all? This has been one of my favourite cartoons ever since I've been doing these kinds of presentations. We do have such preconceived questions and answers a lot of the time. When we do surveys, questionnaires, interviews, those kinds of things with closed questions, we don't give people the opportunity to talk about their own experiences. And when we do lived experience research, one of the first things people say to us is, ask us open-ended, talk to us, have a relationship with us. If we're going to tell you about the really personal stuff, we don't want the answers to be yes and no, because then you just disappear and take our stories with you. What we want is to be able to tell our stories in our own way. So my memoir, book, journal, thing to be thrown in the garbage, has been titled Living on the Edge. So we say I've reached middle age, when all of those physical effects of a life well or maybe not so well lived creep in. In my 20s, when the ride was the wildest, I chose to accept a medical approach to managing my life. I also chose to accept being medicated. The forces were destructive and tearing my life apart. There were many ways it could have ended then, figuratively and literally. Choosing to be medicated put enough restraints on things for me to put life back on the track I deeply desired. Finding something that balanced side effects with therapeutic effects was a long and very arduous task, but eventually I ended up on slow-release lithium monotherapy. Now, in some ways, I count that as lucky, as although lithium has a side effect as long as its history of use, now 70 plus years, on the balance, it's better than many of the other choices. But for those of us with unquiet minds, we seem to be unfairly locked in a battle of physical and mental health. For some reason, nobody can come up with solutions that balance both. We have to sacrifice one if we want the other one to improve, or else live in an uneasy world of both being livable rather than the best they can be. Treading water, that's not what a full life looks like. So, the people factor. This is why I do lived experience research. Now, this little quote here is actually from the original NHMRC statement on consumer and community participation. One of the reasons that I use the original one is that I think the statement's going backwards. And I think that the same sort of statement in the newer one waters down the importance of actually having lived experience in research. Because what I like about this is that if research is to continue to provide high quality outcomes, it's important to have consumer involvement at the centre. Whereas, you know, we've kind of gone into this wishy-washy language about it being desirable and, you know, maybe something good kind of thing. So I think it's really important that we capture the passion of people like me. But again, we're talking about the whole person. We're talking about people who have multiple conditions. We have families, we have jobs, we have things we want to enjoy. And so when we're looking to involve people, we are not looking to involve the person with bipolar disorder and forget about the rest of it. We actually want to hear about everything that people bring to the room. It's also a bit of a hazard. When I was really going through the early stages of being what was then a consumer researcher, which I now prefer the language lived experience researcher, there was this little bit of a sense of me being a bit of a curiosity. And so I started using this one because of how that made me feel, because if I was taken to a conference to do a lived experience talk, it was like, oh, look at this, isn't she amazing? But it was like, keep the trained monkey over there, you know, we're in that space. And that's one of the things that I've been working really hard on for quite a number of years, is to actually make sure that we are not just the trained monkeys in the corner, that we are actually people who are central to what we are doing in all of our research. So if we go back to the story, early this year, for a few reasons, I decided the time had come to see if lithium was blocking my efforts to lose weight and improve my metabolic health. A part of me secretly hoped I had grown out of bipolar disorder and could manage my mental health on my own. It took only 2 days for my brain to react to the significant reduction in chemical restraint. It felt like somebody took off the mute button and the first sound was Suddenly I had all the thoughts and they were so beautiful and so important. I felt an internal intensity and drive that I know is as risky as it is seductive. In this state, people comment I'm brighter, funnier and more creative, which just encourages me, but also don't stop, because I need something to hold on to in the other stages of this. I feel the need to speak in lots of similes and metaphors, use poetic and rhyming language. I see, feel and admire a lot of beauty in the world, but I'm also hypersensitive to too much noise. These feelings are really familiar. The question of whether I'd grown out of bipolar disorder was rapidly being answered. I still wanted to see if it was a simple chemical rebound or something deeper. So I waited and I watched myself and I put a safety net of trusted friends in place. Now, I know all the clinicians and serious researchers in the room are going, whoa, non-compliance. Yeah, there's that one of those people with bipolar who go off their meds all the time. Yeah. I want to think about it in a different lens. From the perspective of the person here, this is about quality of life. Like I said, I've been locked in a battle against my weight and my metabolic health for many, many years, culminating now, and I also have a heart problem. Yay. So for me, having a think about whether 20 years on lithium is interacting with that is a really important thing for me to actually think about. It is actually one of those things where I shouldn't have to make a choice of, do I have decent physical health, or do I have decent mental health, or do I have some kind of holding pattern of both of them that's not really good for either? Yeah, don't know. So for me, the thing about the elevated mood state is that it doesn't stay in the pretty fun space for long. My creative mind has a picture of my own mind, and it's a pink neural net where all the synapses, or maybe the thoughts, are replaced with pretty pink butterflies. At the beginning of hypomania, this is a really active and connected place. The butterfly thoughts excitedly flit about and are able to be captured and channeled into creativity and productivity. This stage runs its own course, and it's generally only a week or two before the butterflies start escaping. Everything gets so much harder to pin down. I can't follow conversations, and the thought trains run right off the tracks. Eventually, the pink net explodes, and a maelstrom of disorganised but intense thoughts ensues. On the outside, what you may see is me appearing distracted or slow to react. That's the outward projection of an inner chaos. I make more odd mistakes of spelling or use incorrect words, but I don't see, or maybe I just don't care. I have to hunt in my head for what I'm trying to say, and even experience the complete inability to understand what somebody is saying mid-sentence. It's like they suddenly switch to another language and I can't understand. This is also the hallmark of what comes next, the dark side of mania. A lot of clinical material states that dysphoria is a mix of sadness or hopelessness with the energy of mania, but that's not where I go. Everything that was pretty pink butterflies turns into savage little black-fanged creatures that are angry and looking for slights. It's up in the top corner. They're generally as chaotic as the butterflies, let loose, but if they get into formation, then they become rage. This is not a version of me I want to meet, let alone have anyone else to meet. This is the scary stage. This is a space that is destructive to self, life, and relationships. If I can harness the chaotic thoughts, my tongue becomes sharp, sarcastic, and savage. Whereas earlier and prettier stages are an unfiltered free, this is an unfiltered mean. To keep that meanness from surfacing, I become very inwardly focused and only talk to people I think can cope with that struggle. And this feels horribly risky, but I know I can't make it alone. This is my most dangerous state to myself and to others. See how we're going here. Ooh, well. So at this point, I guess you're probably wondering what the crash looks like when it comes. And my creative mind gave me the perfect word for my experience of depression as well: desolate. For me, depression is a grey world of complete absence of colour, features and feelings. Think of a black and white picture of a post-apocalyptic world where there's only broken tree stumps, no trees, no grass, no fauna. There's little sound because there's little to make it. I describe what I do at this stage as cave dwelling, but this is no cave. It's a vast emptiness in which I'm alone and raw. This is not sadness or hopelessness, because these are feelings and I have none. Just a nothingness. I think because my in-between state and personality is naturally quite energetic and creative, I mostly operate a bit extra. When my mind and body finally run out of this extra, I'm laid bare with no energy, colour or feelings to help me deal with the world. So I withdraw into a safe space, both metaphorically in my mind and literally in the world. I become very still, very quiet and barely visible. My mind is slow with thoughts almost absent, and accessing any of them is like digging through grey sludge. Decisions aren't agonising, I just can't even start the process of thinking them. I feel like the armour that I wear to operate in the world, which is enormous and bulletproof when manic, shatters eventually, leaving a vulnerable and naked creature who will bruise and bleed at every word, every sound, every smell and every touch. Although I might feel a deep need for other humans, at this point I can't cope if they're not able to understand what I need, so it's easier not to seek them out. So we're back to the research world for a little while. The reason I've been sharing some of this story for you, and I've been writing this year, so this is very current, is I want you to know that people with lived experience really know themselves. They know what it is. If it's a condition, that they call it a condition, but they know their own experiences. We also know the system really well, or the lack thereof, I have to say. I'm one of those people who says, we don't have a broken system. We don't have a system at all. We also know others with lived experience. And one of the things that I'm really keen on is actually a diversity of lived experience when it comes to research in particular, because if anybody says to me that I'm coming to bring the lived experience to the room, I will very quickly correct them. No, I'm bringing a lived experience to the room. I do have connections with others, and I will speak when others give me the permission to speak about those, but I never pretend to be a representative. And I think we need to get away from the illusion that we have representativeness whenever we have somebody with lived experience in the room, because that's not what it's about. We can help to identify what we need to do to move our research from that efficacy into an effectiveness space, into what's happening in the real world, system gaps, acceptability issues, and connections with others with lived experience. So anybody who is connected with the Alive National Centre for Mental Health Research translation would know that we have annual symposia. And what we do is start to sort through the issues. And this was from our symposium in 2022, when we had a workshop about how we actually do combine experiential and learned knowledge. And we talked through what some of the barriers are. And people says, you know, we can have both, but there are structural barriers in the way of us actually being able to properly value. One of the little metaphors that I really liked is that we need to move away from pyramids of knowledge, because those traditional pyramids of knowledge, lived experience doesn't even get on them. The bottom level is expert clinical knowledge. And where are the people with lived experience at all? But we need to move to this idea of a volcano where lived experience is the centre and it needs to go down the outside. So that brings us to our embedded model. So within Alive, what we've done is actually created a model where lived experience is the centre and is the bridge across all of our programs of research. So you can see the 4 around the outside. I'm not going to go through them. I'm sure everybody in the room can read for themselves. And you can also find this on our website and that sort of thing. The whole idea, though, is that through priority setting exercises, through our lived experience research collective, and through the model that we operate on, that lived experience is the centre of what we do. And it provides that scaffolding to all of our research programs and to our other networks to make sure that lived experience is thoroughly embedded in everything we do. And now we are actually moving towards this idea, here we go, that the monkey's running the show. Yeah. So where am I now? In an interesting development, the switch that had been flipped to let loose all that chaos has flipped back, at least partially. It might be better to say that somebody found the dimmer switch. My mind is back to primarily butterflies in a connected pin net, although there's some extremely sulky looking black things lurking in the network. And there's quite a few loose strings that I have to pull on from time to time. I dislike the word recovering, as it implies both an upward path and an endpoint. And in my experience, neither apply to my life. However, I'm in a holding pattern and I'm content with that.